So this story is going to be huge. It's going to be manipulated and used by the pro-Russian side to cherry pick certain pieces of it in order to make Ukraine look bad. There was an article, it was in The Economist, here's The Economist magazine, that Ukraine's top general, how he's talking about a breakthrough, that what he needs in order to beat Russia. Now I put this out on my community tab. I asked, help me determine your interest. I would watch the Economist article, or I would not find Dr. Gerdes reading through this to be particularly exciting. 90% to 10% said yes, they would watch something like this. So here we go. It's very important that you understand what he's saying and why. Okay, 5 months into its counteroffensive, Ukraine has managed to advance by just 17 kilometers. Russia fought for 10 months around Bakhmut in the east to take a city 6 by 6 kilometers. So neither side, and I like how the Economist is framing this, neither side is really getting any traction, and that's really the big story here. General Valery Zaluzhny says the battlefield reminds him of the great conflict of a century ago. Just like in the First World War, we have reached a level of technology that puts us into a stalemate. Okay, it's because they only have particular technology that they can't do anything more. If they had different technology, they'd be able to do something more. That's kind of the thesis moving forward. He says the general concludes that it would take a massive technological leap to break the deadlock. Well, a leap from where they actually are, with the equipment that they have, with the materials, the resources that they have in order to prosecute the war. It has also undercut General Zaluzhny's assumption that he could stop Russia by bleeding its troops. Now, he did have a theory that, so we talked about this some time ago. There was this like head-on attack right into the minefields, and then there was like, well, let's just try to devastate the troops behind the lines and just cut down by attrition. And that was a good strategy, except it's not, because Russia doesn't care about how many they lose in this war. Quote, that was my mistake. Russia had lost at least 150,000 dead. In any other country, such casualties would have stopped the war, but it's not in Russia, where life is cheap. And that's right. And you have to understand your enemy to understand that they don't really care about how many they lose. The pride of Russia is more important than some mother's dead son. An army of Ukraine's standard ought to have been able to move at a speed of 30 kilometers a day as it breached Russian defensive lines. Quote, if you look at NATO's textbooks and at the math we did in planning the counteroffensive, 4 months should have been enough time for us to have reached Crimea, says General Zaluzhny sardonically. Quote, first I thought there was something wrong with our commanders, so I changed some of them. Then I thought maybe our soldiers are not fit for purpose, so I moved soldiers in some brigades, says General Zaluzhny. The commander told his staff to dig out a book which he once saw as a student in a military academy in Ukraine. It was titled Breaching Fortified Defense Lines. And before I even got halfway through it, I realized this is exactly where we are, because just like then, the level of our technological development today has put both us and our enemies in a stupor. So the headline here should be that neither Russia nor Ukraine can really punch through the other side because of the way that they're fighting. Now, what's going to happen is that there's going to be other quotes that will be lifted from this. For example, that there's so many dead, and that if you look at NATO's textbooks and math and our planning, 4 months should have been enough. And people will take that and say, but there's a stalemate, and they'll run with that. And that's going to be unfortunate, but that's what's going to happen. Okay, that thesis, he says, was borne out as he visited the front lines in Avdiivka. The same picture unfolds when Ukrainian troops try to advance. So it's on both sides. Neither side can really make headway from where the lines are right now. The simple fact is that we see everything the enemy is doing, and they see everything that we're doing. In order for us to break the deadlock, we need something new. Now, we have potential armaments that have not been sent, or when they were sent very late, and they allowed the Russians to dig in. This time, however, the decisive factor will not be a single new invention, but a combination of all the technological solutions that already exists, he says. In an article written for The Economist by General Zaluzhny here, as well as in a full-length essay shared with the newspaper, he urges the innovation in drones, electronic warfare, anti-artillery capabilities, and demining equipment, including new robotic solutions. Quote, we need to ride the power embedded in new technologies. says the general. Western allies have been overly cautious in supplying Ukraine with their latest technology and more powerful weapons. Let's stop right there. They have been. They've been way too late in equipping Ukraine with the tools that they need in order to fight. They've been dragging their feet, trying to avoid crossing over one of Putin's red line, only to find that that red line wasn't really a red line after all. Joe Biden, America's president, set objectives at the start of Russia's invasion to ensure that Ukraine was not defeated and that America was not dragged into confrontation with Russia. That's two very good objectives. But the second one is really being overly conservative, and I don't mean politically, I mean just overly cautious in what they're giving so that they don't trip over a red line. But those red lines were just Putin preventing the West from actually arming Ukraine with what they need. Putin effectively deterred the West. That's the reality of that. General Zaluzhny is not complaining. Quote, "They're not obligated to give us anything, and we're grateful for what we've got, but I'm simply stating the facts," unquote. Okay, that seems like a pretty fair assessment. But by holding back the supply of long-range missile systems and tanks, the West allowed Russia to regroup and build up its defenses. That's exactly what happened. So when they left Kherson almost without a fight. And I remember saying it at the time, I'm like, it's great that you got the land, but you didn't get the troops. And then what Surovikin did was he fortified that line. Surovikin got a big black eye in the eyes of Russia. He actually has done more for Russia than just about anyone else, unfortunately. I don't want that to be, but the Surovikin line is what we're dealing with right now. These systems were most relevant to us last year, but they only arrived this year, he says. Similarly, F-16 jets, due next year, are now less helpful, suggests the general, in part because Russia has improved air defenses. So if you had had them before the improved air defenses, you could kind of walk onto a kindergarten playground as a high schooler. That's pretty much what you could have done, but that's not going to happen at this point. Now they have to be extra cautious with those F-16s. It's important to understand that this war cannot be won with the weapons of the past generation and outdated methods, he insists. Quote, "They will inevitably lead to delay and as a consequence defeat. That's going to be a line that will be cherry-picked out of this, used by Russian repeaters again and again and again. Even Zaluzhny said that they're going to be inevitably led to delay and as a consequence defeat. You just watch." It is, instead, technology that will be decisive. He was encouraged by recent conversations with Eric Schmidt, the former chief executive of Google, and stressed the decisive role of drones and electronic warfare, which can prevent them from flying. Whoever figures that out that's going to be huge if you can shoot down drones, because right now drones are just running wanton. I did a video just a couple days ago with one of the 3 big stories kind of episodes where there was an article about a $400 drone can knock out a $2 million tank. That's a 5,000-fold return. So whoever can figure out how to knock drones down is going to be huge in the unfolding saga of what's happening in war. The implication is that Ukraine is stuck in a long war. That's going to be another talking point that the Russians will use, that the Russian repeaters will use. One in which he acknowledges Russia has the advantage. Another talking point for them. Nevertheless, he insists that Ukraine has no choice but to keep the initiative by remaining on the offensive. Yes, they have to keep the initiative. They have to keep their Western partners showing them, yes, we're doing something. And they've been crazy innovative, but they haven't been able to break through this line. Crimea, he believes, remains Mr. Putin's greatest vulnerability. I think it's a little bit different. I think Russia itself is Mr. Putin's greatest vulnerability. When he can attack into Russia pretty much anywhere where there's no air defense, I think that can change the equation. But let's say Crimea, he believes, remains Mr. Putin's greatest vulnerability. It's the linchpin of his imperial restoration project, and his legitimacy rests on having brought it back to Russia. Now, Putin's about to have an election in just about half a year from now, and when he has that election, he wants to show that he has not only taken Crimea, as he did in 2014, but all 4 of these oblasts all the way to their borders, and that's what Avdiivka is all about. It's trying to move to the borders of Donetsk. On October 30th, Ukraine struck Crimea with American-supplied long-range ATACMS missiles for the first time, and that was huge. But now Russia's now thinking, I have to back things up, I have to figure out the air defense, whatever. Had they had the ATACMS long ago, things could have been different on the battlefield. The biggest risk of an attritional trench war is that it can drag on for years and wear down the Ukrainian state. That will be another quote that will be covered again and again by the repeaters. A collapse in Ukrainian morale and Western support is precisely what Mr. Putin is counting on. There is no question in General Zaluzhny's mind that a long war favors Russia, a country with a population 3 times and an economy 10 times the size of Ukraine's. Let's be honest, it's a feudal state where the cheapest resource is human life. And for us, the most expensive thing we have is our people. Now that's really a telling profound difference between the Russians, who are willing to just sacrifice everything, and the Ukrainians, who are very cautious with expending human life. For now, General Zaluzhny says he has enough soldiers, but the longer the war goes on, the harder it will be to sustain. We need to look for this solution. We need to find this gunpowder, quickly master it, and use it for a speedy victory, because sooner or later, we're going to find that we simply don't have enough people to fight. Okay, that last line again will be used by Russian talking points. Even Zaluzhny said sooner or later we are going to find that we simply don't have enough people to fight. It's not the case now. It's not saying that he's running into it, but that's what's going to be covered. Okay, so you got a fair assessment of what Zaluzhny actually said. And I'm telling you, if you watch Russian propaganda channels or Russian repeaters like McGregor and Ritter and Redacted and others, that's how they're going to frame it. Okay, I hope that helps you understand what has happened, how this has all worked out, and what he really said. He really said, we're stuck, they're stuck, we need some additional means to get unstuck, some other technological something that will help us get the edge. Had they had the F-16s, they could have had the edge, but they didn't have them. Had they had the longer range ATACMS, they could have had them. But right now, they need something above and beyond what they have. Otherwise, they're going to keep getting the results that they're getting. Okay, tell me what you thought about this. I think that the Economist article is extremely fair. Unlike the Time article that just came out about Zelensky, I think this article was very fair, but it will be twisted in Russian media and with Russian propagandists. Okay, thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.